All right, Tuesday night, another movie review. First one of 2019, hopefully not the last one. Tonight I went to see Clint Eastwood's The Mule. It was a very sweet story. It tells the story of an aging farmer whose business at the end of his life starts to fail as the character fails to adapt to a changing market around him. Despite the fact that he's sacrificed all of his time for his business and not for his family, he finds himself without any means and losing his flower farm. So Earl finds himself another line of work, and that of a drug mule for a Mexican cartel. And of course, Earl is played by Clint Eastwood. This movie was directed and produced by Clint Eastwood. And, it occurred to me recently that I haven't seen many Clint Eastwood movies. In fact, the only one I can think of is one I just watched a week ago, In the Line of Fire. And I know he's in a lot of classic films, so I think I've got a lot of catching up to do, I think. And perhaps I'll be working at it backwards going forward. So the movie was very sweet. Clint Eastwood was a very charismatic character in this movie. A sort of stubbornly old-fashioned man who remained unflappable, remained cool in very harrowing, intense situations. The film didn't get particularly well reviewed, and I think it deserves a better rating than it's getting on, let's say, Rotten Tomatoes. One thing you sort of have to adjust film ratings now if you're going to go look at them and try to guess how good or bad a film actually is, because there's this significant political aspect to movie reviews now, so you have to kind of tease out how much of, in particular, the critics reviews are biased based on their politics. So if a film doesn't meet the sort of left wing or social justice narrative or ideals, then a lot of critics will either consciously or unconsciously rank the movie down, or they'll rank the movie lower, rate the movie lower, because it's racist or it's not woke enough or whatever the case may be. So you have to learn kind of how to interpret critical reviews these days when you're looking at something like Rotten Tomatoes, and you kind of need to plus 10% or plus 1 star if the material is not leftist pablum, or it's somewhat conservative in its messaging or in its tone. So I think seeing Rotten Tomatoes, I think this had a score from the critics of 64%, and I think that's too low for this film. It wasn't perfect and it wasn't excellent. I wouldn't say that, but it was good. Clint Eastwood, as I said, was charismatic throughout, and it was an interesting story and reasonably well told. The acting was quite solid throughout, and the writing had some good moments of natural humor, and there was some emotional poignancy throughout it. My criticisms of it would be that it was a little bit too slow. There was probably some times that he could have introduced more tension into many of the scenes, and perhaps removed some other somewhat repetitive scenes. But all in all, it did move along and created some interesting tension. But ultimately, it's about this character reflecting on his failings in life and his failure to devote time to his family, and what that and reflecting on what that has cost him as he enters into this new career field. and so he's trying to rebuild or regain that family that he lost throughout this movie, and has to learn something about himself and about the way he lived his life before he can do that. So the movie worked with Eastwood's charisma and his humor, and ultimately I think it did succeed emotionally as well. Another criticism I would have is of how it was shot. Maybe I'm being a bit picky here. I have pretty high expectations for how I want a movie to look, which is either just gorgeous or novel. The movie wasn't poorly shot, I wouldn't say, but it wasn't particularly interesting in the way it was shot. There, wasn't any novel cinematographic ideas being expressed, if I can make up a word and try to communicate that. I know that's hardly surprising. As I said, it is a fairly conservatively toned film. It's just not surprising that there's no strange jump cuts or weird angles or anything like that. Not that that's what I'd be looking for, but I do like to see, some, I can say, experimentation or some originality in how a movie is shot, and I didn't really see that in this film. There was some beautiful images of the countryside, though indeed. So, all in all, it was good. It was a sweet story with a charismatic lead. Not perfect and not exceptional, but an enjoyable film all the same. So that's it. Next week, I'm going to see Vice with a few other folks. So we'll see you next week. Thanks so much for watching.